why start a perennial from a seed when you can spend like $2 or $3 for an herb? And if it's a perennial, you don't have to spend that again.
Yeah. How are you doing today, Greg?
Oh, doing great.
Awesome.
No complaints.
Good. Yeah, I mean, it's supposedly spring, and I guess when we're recording this, you don't have snow there, but we're getting some snow. Maybe last minute snowstorm down here, but forecast is good for the next week or so. So maybe that'll get things going and growing. So.
And it's not snowing, but if I want to see snow, all I got to do is open the drapes here, and of course I can see all the snow I want.
Right.
It's still around.
Yes, that's right. I remember seeing that in the video that we've put up. So yeah. So what the topic today is all about transplants. Is that correct?
That's right. We're going to do the issue we're going to talk about today is whether to buy or grow them on your own. I mean, a lot of people who are growing transplants have already started, but there's some transplants you wouldn't really start them till around now anyway, like your peppers and tomatoes and eggplant and heat-loving things like that. Well, before we get started on that, I just wanted to make a couple notes, just speaking to the video I just put out. Whenever you finish these things, you realize, oh, I should have said this, or I should have said that, or so on and so forth. So rather than, field, because I know there'll be thousands of questions.
Yeah.
So, just in case I'm flooded with questions.
Yep.
So people might ask me, why did you build a frame around them? Why didn't you just put the plastic down? Why didn't you just put the mesh down and that sort of stuff? And the reason is because it'll blow away. Where I am, I mean, if you don't have this issue in your garden, then you don't need it. You don't need to build a frame around it. That's I have to, because it has to be something I can lash or weight down. I've got rocks. You don't see it in the video, but the mesh ones don't need any weights. They seem to hold on, but the plastic, that's a sail. That's an umbrella that's just waiting to fly.
Yeah.
So I've got rocks on every corner to hold them in place, because they'll just fly away. Otherwise, it's so windy there.
Yeah.
Even the videos, often there's like a bit of a wind noise, and I apologize for that. But it's with the equipment I have currently, that's unavoidable.
Yeah.
So try to minimize it, or pick times of day when the winds are lower. But anyway, it's either videos with wind or no video.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Hey, you're doing what you can.
Yeah, exactly. I think people like to see stuff.
Yeah.
So that the reason I chose the size, the dimension I chose, so I can put them away easily.
Yeah.
I chose a size that two of them pretty much fits perfectly in my box, and I can just lean these against the wall in my shed, and they sort of disappear. I don't like clutter, and I don't have infinite space, so I like things. I don't want them around in the garden when when it's warm. I want all that stuff out. I just want the garden to look like dirt and rocks and wood and plants, sort of thing.
A garden, yeah.
Yeah. And you might ask how they're working. So I went out and checked this morning. So it was below zero last night. So that's the best time to check how effective they are. Isn't at the height of day when it's hot, but like, what effect are they having? You know that the next day. So the gardens that there's nothing on, they are frozen again. The top inch or two had thawed a little bit yesterday on the gardens with nothing.
Yeah.
But they have frozen again. Frozen and sort of heaved, with the frost. The gardens with the black mesh are thawed to about 2 inches deep.
Okay.
And still thawed. If it doesn't warm up, they might freeze again today.
Yeah.
But it was below zero all night, and there was enough heat in the ground as a result of having those, I'm going to call them heat magnets, to keep it from refreezing overnight.
Yeah.
It was probably like -5 last night or something like that, -5 Celsius. The plastic, that is thawed down to 4 inches right now. It's the ground's still frozen below 4 inches, because I don't know how. I should get out there with a pickaxe and see how deep the ice or the frost goes.
Yeah.
But so anyway, they're still frozen underneath. But anyway, the heat penetrated 4 inches, and maybe more. I don't know, but it penetrated at least 4 inches, and they remained thawed.
Yeah.
Moreover, I mean, on the underside of the plastic this morning when I was out there around 8:30 a.m. There was water droplets underneath the plastic, so that tells me that the ground had stored up enough heat to keep ice from forming on the underside of the plastic all night as well.
Yeah.
The ground was like, radiating heat up.
Right.
That's pretty good. That's not bad for a couple bucks worth of plastic and the cheapest lumber you can buy. 1-3 strapping. So definitely worth the while. I'm going to build a couple more, and you only need these for a little while. And the only reason you need them is if you have a spring like this one. I mean, any spring you can use this to bring things along a little sooner, but especially ones like this where, like, man, I want my ground to thaw before the summer solstice.
Yeah, exactly. And for people who are wondering what video this is, just go to our Facebook page and it'll be the video posted just before this episode. So if you find episode 31, just scroll down a little more, you'll see the video. And we'll also have it in our YouTube channel, so you can find it there as well.
And our website.
And yes, imagine that.
MaritimeGardening.com.
Everything that we post of significance is also posted as basically a blog entry on the website. So just go to maritimegardening.com. Check it out.
That's right. Oh, and one further note on that. I was going to take a picture, but I planted some seeds in my coal frames about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And some of them have germinated. I believe the kale and the Swiss chard, and possibly the lettuce. Mm-hmm. I planted romaine lettuce, Paris Cos, I think the variety. They have all germinated. There's only one. I don't even remember. I don't tend to put sticks to tell me what. Normally, when the plants come up, I can tell what it is just by looking at the shape of the caudal leaves. Yeah. If not the secondary leaves that come out. But for most of them, I've got little tiny. I've got 2 leaves showing, the initial 2 leaves. So stuff's happening there,
Cool.
So they did have an effect, right? Whereas everything else is frozen. Yeah. And it takes longer because the temperature isn't constantly above zero, right? Some nights in March, the ground, some mornings in March when I checked the cold frames, the ground had, the top inch or so had frozen, which is where the most important thing is that the cold frames keep the ground underneath from freezing. Right. So, the top little inch or so might get frosty or might freeze up a bit, but then by noon it's melted again, and of course the ground 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches, everything below is also not frozen. Right. But anyway, that stuff slows down germination, of course. But if you're planting something that's tough that can take a bit of freezing and thawing, then it will germinate. It just won't germinate in 1 week like it would in your in your house or whatever, because it's not getting like constant 16 degrees Celsius ideal conditions. No, anyway, just a little bit good. And I don't know about other people, but nothing has come up in my garden at all. Nothing. I got no tulips, I got no garlic, no rhubarb, nothing. Nothing's
big pile of squat. No, we're getting there though. I'd say with the long range. Yeah.
As of April 5th, I got nothing.
Yeah.
Whereas last year's stuff, there was some things happening by this time of year.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you got stuff happening, by all means, share your pictures with us. So transplants. So on the show here, I talk a lot about straight seeding. It's easier in many ways. There's many advantages. No hardening off, no frigging around. I consider it a very, in terms of the time you have to put into growing things, it uses the least amount of your time. Right. They're growing right where they are going to grow, and you don't have to design some sort of transplanting environment, and you don't need all the equipment and accoutrements and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And the plants grow really vigorous and strong because they germinate right in the ground where they start. So that's all great. But of course, I don't straight seed everything. Yeah. And I do use transplants. So then the other thing you have to decide about transplants is buying them versus growing them. Right. So let's first just talk about transplants. Let's talk a little bit more about transplants and the sort of pros and cons, very briefly. Yeah. Because I've talked about seeds and why they're so great, but so let's talk about transplants a little bit here. The advantages is they give you a great head start, right? You can, instead of putting a seed in the ground when it's warm enough for that variety, you can put a plant that's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 inches high. Geez, I got neighbors that grow their tomatoes almost 2 feet high.
They have them in their garage, and they bring them in and out of their garage, and they get this really elaborate process they do. So when my tomatoes are maybe 3 inches tall in my garden, they've got like these 2.5 foot things they bring out.
Oh, okay.
And that's cool. That's great. Their garden is way smaller than mine. It's maybe a tenth the size of mine. Yeah. So that's their main thing is tomatoes and peppers. Really, that's their baby, right. But tomatoes just one of many things for me, and I just don't have I'm not interested in all of that giant science project that's involved in it.
Right.
And they do it successfully. I see them in the spring. Once it gets warm, they'll come home from work and open their garage door and bring the transplants out and let them get a bit of sun, and close the garage door and all this sort of stuff. And you can do all that. It's not my thing.
Yeah.
The other advantage of transplants is you've got pest control when they're young, right? If you're growing them inside your house, they're not going to be getting eaten by slugs and flea beetles and all these other sorts of things, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when I'm straight seeding in my garden, I'll have whole rows disappear some nights just from slugs, let alone rabbits and porcupines and all these other things. So I have to deal with those problems, whereas with the transplant you don't.
Right.
And another advantage of transplants is that they use less seeds, right? You don't have to, I use a lot of seeds when I'm straight seeding, because you assume that things are going to get lost, things are going to get eaten, some of the seeds aren't viable.
Yeah.
But if you want to plant like 6 kale plants indoors in a transplant, maybe you use 2 seeds per cell.
Okay.
That way you pick the better one. So to have 6 plants, you use 12. Whereas to have like a couple, let's say 2 8-foot rows of kale, I use like 100 seeds.
Yeah.
And in the end, once I've thinned that all down, it's only going to be about a dozen kale plants.
Right.
So with some varieties of kale, I have my own seeds anyway. So I have thousands of seeds, right? I don't care.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the advantages, and there's probably other ones too that I can't think of right now, but that's some of the advantages. And of course, the cons are it's a little tedious and time consuming. It depends on your personality type, right? Some people are just dying for something to do. And another advantage of the transplants is something to do in the winter when there's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
From a gardening point of view, I'm sure there's other things that people have busy lives, but there's other things to do. But anyway, one of the cons is that it's tedious and time consuming. You need to dedicate a space somewhere in your home, especially if you want to grow a lot of them. You need to, locate the resources, potting soil and equipment to do them right. It's time consuming, right? So that's the con of transplants. But now let's talk more about buying or growing them.
Yeah. Speaking of buying, can you get these at Kent?
Yes, you can.
Oh, wicked. Awesome. And that's handy because Kent is a partner of our show. So, yeah.
It's great. And I have, the part of the agreement was that I only talk about things that I have done or I'm willing to try to do with regard to their products. I buy Kent transplants every year. I buy transplants from a number of places, but there's certain things I used to only be able to get at Kent, like that Vietnamese coriander, which I love.
Yeah.
And that can't find the seeds anywhere. Like the only way I can grow it is to buy a transplant there and stick it in the ground. Anyway, so yes, you can get and they have a pretty, for a hardware store, they got a pretty good selection. So
yeah, check it out.
Yeah, I think almost all my perennial herbs I bought at Kent. I didn't start any of them from seeds, not one. Because for me, like a perennial, and we'll do a whole episode on perennial, but why start a perennial from a seed when you can spend like $2 or $3 for an herb? And if it's a perennial, you don't have to spend that again. Yeah. So why would I spend $2.99 on a pack of seeds to grow one plant? Because, like one oregano perennial.
Yeah.
That's perennial, something like oregano, it colonizes, it gets bigger every year sort of thing. So that one plant can become, I've probably got oregano growing in 12 different places in my garden. That's all from one plant.
Nice.
But I bought once, the same with a lot of the other ones that have that quality. Not all of them, but a lot of them have that quality. So, why would you bother messing around with seeds for something like that?
Yeah.
Anyway, so we'll talk about growing first. The pros of growing is that it's with transplants you can either buy them or grow them, right?
Yeah.
And growing, the big advantage of growing in my mind, the way I think, is that you have a greater choice of variety, right? If you start a transplant in your house or in your window or in your grow up, you've got more variety.
Yeah.
Right? You've got all the seeds that are sold at the place you like to buy your seeds.
Yeah.
You don't buy them at Kent. And,
yeah.
but I mean, you can buy seeds from anywhere in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you just go on eBay, there's ridiculous options out there for seeds from exotic seeds from anywhere. So if you're growing your own, you've got that option, right?
Yeah.
Limitless options, and that's fun trying different options of things. It can cost less if you need a lot, right? Like if I needed 50 kale transplants, which I don't, it would be a little costly to buy those as transplants because they cost about, I don't know, $2 or $3 for a half dozen.
Yeah.
So if you need a lot, it can cost less. And as I mentioned before, it can be fun. And something to do in late winter, and a lot of people get a sense of satisfaction of starting their own transplants and moving them outside and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. The cost or the con of growing your own is that everything I mentioned before, right? This is tedious. If you don't like tedium, tedious and time consuming, and you need all that equipment and potting soil, and you've got all that nasty mold and mildew issues that. Drives me nuts.
Yeah.
And the hardening off and all that sort of stuff. There's all of that stuff you have to deal with when you do it, right? Whereas if you're, which you don't have to deal with if you just buy them.
Right.
So the other problem or the other con of growing your own is if you only need a few of whatever the plant or variety is, often 6 or 8 plants cost as much as a pack of seeds.
Yeah.
So I can spend $1.99 for 100 kale seeds, or I can spend $1.99 for 6 kale plants.
Yeah.
You got to remember when they get big. A kale plant's like 2 feet wide, maybe 2. Depends on the variety, right? But and your soil conditions and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, if things go well and you're growing a Scotch curly kale or a red Russian kale or a lacinato kale or what have you. There's many different varieties of kale. You're going to have a plant that's a couple feet high and at least a foot wide.
Yeah.
So, a dozen kale plants is a lot. You're going to be eating kale 2 or 3 times a week. You're going to have it coming out your ears.
Right.
Once they mature. So how much do you need of something, right? If you only need about 6, look at your gardening space. Whatever that plant is, if you only need 6, then there's an advantage to just buying the transplant as opposed to buying seeds and then growing them as transplants and going through all the, because the seeds don't last forever. They don't retain their viability forever anyway. It's not like, I'm going to buy a pack of 50 seeds and now I don't have to buy seeds for the next 10 years. Well, depending on what you're growing, those seeds might be, worthless in 5 years. It really depends also on how well you store them and those conditions and so on. Yeah. So, sometimes it makes sense to buy transplants because, geez, if you only need a handful of them, why would you buy 100 seeds and go through all the hassle of starting them from seeds if you only need 6? It's only a savings to transplant if you are growing to grow it yourself if you're growing a lot of them.
Cool.
So if you have a small garden, why not? If you like, it's a thing. So I mean, if you're buying them, right? If you like the varieties that are at the place you're going to buy them, why not just buy them? The other thing is a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, the varieties that are sold at garden centers are the varieties that are very popular that people in the area where you live have found to. It's the varieties that are in demand, and it's because those varieties do well. Like here in Nova Scotia, we have a tomato called the Scotia.
Right.
And of all the varieties of tomatoes I've ever planted, they're pretty. They're a determinate variety, and of course they sell them at Kent, but they sell them everywhere. They sell them everywhere. Right. But it's the variety that does really, really well here in our conditions. It's a fast-growing, tough, sort of pest and disease-resistant tomato. Yeah. So it's another advantage of, especially if you're new to gardening, let someone else figure all that stuff out and just buy them, stick them in the ground. And another advantage to buying transplants is often they're to some degree hardened off. I've never found I have the hardening off issues with bought transplants. When I grow them in my house, especially if I grow them under lights, it is like you got to be very careful getting those things hardened off. Whereas if you buy them from a garden center, and it's been my experience, buy them on a rainy day, plant them on a rainy day. They don't they don't die. Like I've had plants if you started them indoors, if you put them outside on the wrong day, or you move them a little bit too quickly, you practically kill the thing in a matter of hours. So when you buy transplants, you don't seem to have those problems. I don't know if they have them, if they're moving them outside and inside, and they're getting some sort of real sun, something more than just fake lights. They just seem to adapt better to the situation.
Right.
To being outdoors. If you have a small garden, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because you can only plant so much stuff. You can only have so many of everything, and plants get big. So, when there's nothing in the garden, we tend to plant all kinds of things really close. But once things start getting larger, you have to start thinning stuff out anyway. At the end of the day, once your plants mature, you're going to only have a few of everything anyway. Yeah. If you have a large garden, it's handy. Of course, it makes sense if you want heat-loving plants and you don't want to go through the hassle of starting them on your own. Yeah. But also if you want a head start. So, like if you were going to straight seed, I'll keep using kale as an example, but it's popular. Your plan was to straight seed some kale. You still might want to buy 6 kale transplants so that those will come in a bit earlier. Right. So you'll have this, this almost like an early crop of it, right? Because it's jump started, and that way you're not buying a whole ton of. Let's say you want to have 20 kale plants. Well, 6 of them you buy as a transplant sort of thing. So you get those a bit sooner. Anyways, that's my thoughts on the issue of buying transplants. Why to do it? Buying transplants versus growing them yourself. There's advantages and disadvantages on both sides. But hopefully this will give some people something to think about when they're making that decision. If you're just getting started, or you have a small garden, or you're happy with the varieties they sell at the garden center near you, then just make it easy on yourself and buy them. It doesn't make you any less. I think some people think like you're only a real gardener if you have your own transplants. If you grow
grow from seed.
That's rubbish. Like you're a real gardener if you are able to eat food out of your garden.
That's true. That's a good way to look at it.
Sitting there for a meal and it grew in your backyard and you did most of it.
You might be a gardener.
So the fact that growing transplants indoors, it's more of a science thing. I've found anyway. I find it way harder. I'm sure lots of people are going to say, "What are you talking about?" I find it very tedious. I find straight seeding way easier, and every year I have less and less. I got a couple transplants in my window right now. And everything else this year I've got growing under my cold frames. And every year I tell myself I'm not going to buy transplants, but I'm in a garden center. I'm like, oh, those look nice. Yeah. I think I got a place I can stick those in. Yeah, I always end up buying somewhere. Yeah. And I consider myself a real garden. If you look at my garden, I'm pretty into it. It's not you're not cheating. It's just one more strategy in having a successful garden.
Cool. Awesome. Well, that's good. That wraps up episode 31. So again, anyone listening, you want to check the show notes, just go to maritimegardening.com/031.
Wait a sec. The show notes. Yeah. Talk about this?
Yeah, go for it.
Speaking of show notes, I was going to say, I write show notes every week, and I'm not trying to, not like I feel like they're neglected. Yeah. What I do with the show notes, I try to summarize what we talked about in the episode, but also what I do is I listen to the episode and figure out the main themes and write them. But I'll often go into more detail on certain things, or if I feel like I left something out, or if there was some error or omission or anything like that, I try to when I listen to the show. Any question that comes up in my mind based on something I said, why didn't you talk about this, or what about this, or what about that, I'll try to address that in the show notes. So they're not just a copy of what we talked about. They're sort of like a footnote. Yeah. I don't write it that way. I just and make it sound like I'm summarizing a perfect conversation. But there's the podcast is a conversational style, so there's little flaws here and there, and I'm not worried about being perfect when we're doing the podcast. But when I'm writing show notes, I'm much more concerned with having it really hang together. Yeah. So they're meant to complement, and they do add. There's more information in the show notes than we discuss on the show.
Yeah. That's right.
It's not like, it's not 100%. Most of it's what we're talking about. Maybe it's 50-50 or 60-40 or whatever.
Exactly.